think we'll give everybody just another minute or so to join and then get started. All right, well, it's 2 minutes past the hour by my clock, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining. If you haven't already introduced yourself in the chat, please do. We're happy to present today a webinar on new features for organization information in DSpace with ROR. This is a webinar collaboratively organized by Science, which of course, as you know, is a very large contributor to DSpace and open source software, and ROR, the Research Organization Registry. My name is Amanda French. I am Technical Community Manager for ROR, the Research Organization Registry, and I'm going to begin this webinar by telling you a little bit about what ROR is, and then we're going to move on to ROR-enabled features in DSpace. This is the agenda for the meeting. As I say, I'll do a brief, probably 10-minute introduction to ROR. We'll talk about the benefits of ROR integration into DSpace, technical implementation into the system, live demonstration, and then future developments. And we should have some time at the end for your questions as well. So what is the Research Organization Registry? Well, the Research Organization Registry is a global community-led registry of open persistent identifiers for research organizations. We can talk about what a research organization is, but essentially it's any organization that is involved in research. Universities, laboratories, companies, funders, research centers are all considered research organizations. ROR was actually released in 2019. So in the last 5 years, we've become an extremely trusted, established, widely adopted, entirely free service that's becoming a standard in scholarly communication and scholarly publishing. So I would think that probably most people on this call are familiar with DOIs, digital object identifiers, for research outputs, such as journal articles and data sets, and presentations, gray literature, all of that kind of thing. I'm sure everyone is also familiar with ORCID IDs for researchers, and ROR is really the latest entry into that family of persistent identifiers, and our job is to identify the organizations as opposed to the outputs or the researchers. We work very closely, in fact, with the providers of DOIs such as Crossref and DataCite, and in fact I am full-time employed at Crossref. I'll talk a little bit about that more, and we work quite closely with ORCID as well. So what are some of the benefits of integrating ROR into your system? The main benefit is like that of the other persistent identifiers. It makes information clean, normalized, and easy to exchange among the many, many systems that are used in scholarly communication and scholarly publishing. And when these systems are all using persistent identifiers, outputs, researchers, and organizations can all be linked to one another. Persistent identifiers like ROR create connections among information that are really crucial for tracking, for instance, what research has this university produced. Only ROR offers a free, open, easy, curated, community-led solution that allows research organization metadata to travel freely between scholarly systems. Put in a little bit of an extra brag here. Just recently, ROR was one of the 4 finalists for the ALPSP Innovation in Publishing Awards. We didn't win, but oddly enough, the winner, Adam Day of Clear Skies, who developed a paper mill detection tool called the paper mill alarm, in fact, is a ROR fan and uses ROR in his work. So here's a sort of a visual representation of what a ROR record is. This is ROR as it looks on the web. We have a very nice, easy to search ROR interface on the web, and I encourage all of you to go to ror.org/search and look up your own organization's ROR ID, as someone mentioned they did earlier in the chat. Here's a typical ROR record for the University of Milan. You can see the ROR ID itself in the upper left. All ROR IDs have 9 characters that are randomly generated that begin with a 0. We have the name of the organization displayed, or a name of the organization, what kind of organization it is, other names for this organization, including names in other languages, acronyms, and aliases, which I like to think of as nicknames. Much of the data that we have inherited has names for organizations in English, but it is in fact our policy that a university can have its name in any language. Presumably it's the language that is the primary language of the place where it is located. So for instance, we may, if somebody requested it, we would happily change the primary displayed name on this record to the name in Italian, which might make sense. And in case you hadn't noticed, there on the bottom left is the place where you can suggest a change. In small print down there, we'll tell you when this record was last modified. And if you'd like to suggest a change to this record, you can do so quite easily, just with the form on the web. We have a central team of curators that reviews all requests. And usually once they are approved, and the vast majority of requests are approved because they are simple things like, correct this website, correct the spelling of this name, that sort of thing. Usually those requests go live within 2 to 4 weeks in ROR. Other features of the ROR record, from what you can see on this webpage, we have relationships to organizations are also represented in ROR. So many organizations have child organizations at universities. That's typically research centers. Related associations, hospitals are often essentially standalone institutions, but that have a relationship to a university. You can see all those represented really within the ROR data. Locations for an organization, including latitude and longitude, although that's not shown here. The website, this is very crucial for legacy systems, other identifiers for this institution. As you can see on this slide, we currently have over 110,000 records for research organizations around the world, and that's an increase from something around 90 or the low 90,000 records back in 2019. Our rate of new record creation has increased a lot in the last 2 years. All ROR metadata is CC0, and of course, while this is a nice web view, the really powerful value of ROR is that it's available as exchangeable data in both JSON and CSV formats and via a completely free REST API. So this is typically how ROR is implemented. A software developer builds ROR into a system, and then a user may submit information into that system. So typically, for instance, if an author is submitting a manuscript in a system that is integrated with ROR, when asked what organization they're affiliated with, they'll choose from a drop-down list of organizations that is powered by ROR. So a user in this case may never see the ROR ID at all. They'll just choose an organization from a list that is powered by ROR, but then that ROR ID will be available on the back end. And what that does is eliminate a lot of problems with different spellings, different languages for organization names. It just standardizes and cleans all that data and associates it with a single record. Then when that system shares metadata with other systems, including when it creates DOIs, that metadata will include the ROR ID, and that way, if there's any doubt about what organization this is, that can be discovered via the ROR registry. And then systems can build tools on top of that for business intelligence, for tracking, for all kinds of reporting, for associating funders with research outputs, for associating universities with research outputs, and many, many more use cases. So these are just some of the features of ROR. Entirely free data, entirely free REST API. I've heard over and over again that ROR is very easy to use. It's a really modern system, modern REST API. Multilingual metadata and character sets. If you're using a language that has right to left, we can support that. We support everything, Chinese, Japanese, Asian alphabets, Arabic alphabets, Hebrew, all of that. We do have organization hierarchies and relationships, as I mentioned. We are very proud of our curation process, which means, the process by which we review requests for new records or changed information to existing records. So if you make a request for that, we will review it. And in general, once that is approved, that will be published in the registry within 2 to 4 weeks. We tend to do batch releases about twice a month. Those mappings to other identifiers really crucial. And then the other thing that you can't really see from just the ROR record is that we offer a lot of software services, including just an endpoint on our API for if you have a database that's full of text strings of organization names, usually, we can help you match those to ROR IDs and thus help clean up and normalize a lot of messy text data that you may have. I used to run a DSpace-based repository at Virginia Tech, and I can tell you that that was a big problem, really being able to say, okay, and of course, in an institutional repository, most of the research was associated with Virginia Tech, but plenty of collaborations, right? And very, very difficult to say, all right, how many of Virginia Tech researchers based on data in the institutional repository are collaborating with people from specific other institutions just because that text data was so messy. So at ROR, if you do have a lot of that text data, we can help you, or we can provide tools that will help you match all of those organization names to ROR IDs. And of course, we do have that beautiful searchable web interface at ror.org/search. ROR is used for many purposes. The sort of basic use case for ROR is, here is this researcher who probably has an ORCID ID. What organization are they currently affiliated with? And then a ROR ID for that organization should be used in the system. That's the very typical use case, but we see lots and lots of other use cases. And a lot of use cases flow from that. One of the sort of emerging use cases for ROR is ROR IDs to identify funders and therefore to connect funders with researchers. Some of you may know about the funder registry, formerly known as FundRef. That is maintained by Crossref and is being deprecated in favor of ROR. So all the major funding organizations are already in ROR. We're always adding more and encouraging people to use ROR IDs to identify funders in their systems. We're seeing a lot of publishers and universities use ROR IDs to manage transformative agreement deals. So a publisher and a university might a publisher might give a discount to a university for when that university's researchers publish with that publisher. And so in order to do that, the publisher needs to know, all right, how many times have this institution's researchers published with us? And so ROR IDs become really, really useful for tracking that kind of thing and creating those deals. In the US, at least, and in many countries as well, and in the EU, there's an increasing tendency for people to create guidance about the necessity for this kind of metadata to be open and free and trackable. So in the US, we had a memo in August of 2022 that came out of the White House arguing for increased open access for federally funded research, but also recommending the use of open persistent identifiers so that all of these connections can be easily tracked. But just generally, the purpose of ROR is to improve the quality of metadata in the global research ecosystem. Many systems are founded on ROR. As I mentioned, I do work for Crossref, and ROR is the recommended institutional identifier in Crossref metadata, DOI metadata. The same is true at DataCite. ORCID adopted ROR several years ago, and ROR is now increasingly the default and recommended organization identifier in ORCID. So again, that work, you can actually see it in the ORCID display if you go look at your own ORCID record, but it is also working on the back end. If you say, I am affiliated with such and such university, and you edit that right now, that's going to be powered by a ROR ID, and you can in fact expand that to see the ROR ID for that institution. Lots of large databases, indexes, or what you might call knowledge graphs, are using ROR. Just last week at the ROR community call, we had a presentation from Web of Science. They are in the process of integrating ROR for organizations into Web of Science, and they say that that will launch this month. So we're very excited about that, and we'll do lots of press releases and so on about that once that is complete. OpenAlex, which some of you may know, uses ROR IDs as its foundational organizational identifier. The Lens, Europe PMC are all using ROR. And these are only some of them. There are plenty more of these kinds of databases that are using ROR. Repository systems, such as DSpace, which we will hear about, Dryad, Zenodo, and Figshare are all standardizing on ROR IDs to identify institutions in their data. Publishing systems are also adopting ROR. The current version of Open Journal Systems supports ROR a little bit, but future versions, especially the forthcoming 3.5 version, are going to be very much kind of architected around ROR, and will allow users of that version of OJS to send ROR IDs in DOI metadata and exciting things like that. Places like AAAS science journals, publishing platforms like Scholastica are all using ROR, and we're seeing increased use of this by publishers every day. So how is ROR sustained? How is it run? What is its business model? I love our business model. It's not even a business model, really. ROR is free and will remain free. And the reason it's free and will remain free is that we're sustained operationally by Crossref, DataCite, and the California Digital Library, all of whom consider ROR to be an essential part of this scholarly communication infrastructure. So we are not reliant on member fees. We are not reliant on grants. We are not reliant on premium tiers of the ROR API. None of that is necessary for us. Our operating costs are paid for by Crossref, DataCite, and CDL. We renegotiate that agreement every 2 years. And it means that we can take grant money for time-limited projects and so on, but it means that ROR will be around for a long, long time and will always be free to use. So if you'd like to learn more about ROR, you can get in touch with me personally, or you can just visit us at roar.org. So with this, I'm going to hand it over to Andrea. Andrea?
Thanks, Amanda. I'm going to proceed with the slide. There we are. So thanks for joining this webinar. As anticipated by Amanda, I'm Andrea Bollini from For Science. I'm the CTIO of For Science. And we are very proud today to present the work that has been done for DSpace and DSpace-CRIS with the integration of ROR out-of-box Science DSpace 8.0 and in DSpace-CRIS starting from the version 7.6. So which is the goal of this integration? What we expect from this integration is to, this is, on our opinion, is the founding stone of a better interoperability for the repository. It's really important to be able to create a more integrated and open scholarly ecosystem. And all of that is in the direction of a better fair repository. So which are the key benefits that we envision for DSpace and DSpace-CRIS via the ROR integration? We expect to enhance the metadata quality. Repositories are full of information about organization and relation of mainly research output to this organization. And all of us know how hard it is to disambiguate organization, how creative could be the scientist mentioning organization in their publication. So other than just the name of the organization is become more and more crucial to have an identifier to disambiguate such organization. And of course, once that we have better metadata quality, better metadata in our repository, we can improve the discoverability. So this is not really a feature that has been introduced by the ROR integration, but is a side effect. So as you are controlling the value for affiliation, for mentioning the organization, this will mean that your browser, your facet will become cleaner and cleaner because you will use the same form, same name for the same organization across your repository. And finally, the most important point from my perspective is about interoperability. So the repository are the core of our open scholarly ecosystem. And we want to have data in the repository to become more and more essential for the open science. To be able to do that, to compete also with commercial service, we need to provide good metadata. And we need to connect our information with all the information in other open database. And this will be possible exporting not only the ROR identifier, but any persistent identifier in the repository, also in a machine-readable way. And this is what we have done for ROR in IPMH and with integration with ORCID that we will see during the live demo. So here you just see two screens from DSpace 8 that show how you can have a relation between a publication and a person, or a person and an organization, publication and organization. So in this case, we have added a link to a dataset to an organization, University of Basilicata, that was searched into Research Organization Registry, ROR. As a result of this search, the data, basic data from ROR has been imported in DSpace. So an ORC unit has been created in the repository to represent the University of Basilicata. And you see the ROR identifier and that express the ROR as a full URL according to the ROR logo guideline. And this is the sample publication that is linked to a research project that has been funded by the University of Basilicata. All of that is connected within your repository, your DSpace repository. Which is the value of all this connection? The value of all this connection can be seen, for instance, into IPMH. A record for the publication has expressed according to the OpenAIRE literature version 4 guideline. The person, the author, is identified by ORCID. So the ORCID ID is included into OIPMH record. But if you look at the bottom of the record, you also will see a funding reference. And this is the project. And this project mentions a funder. And in this case, is an internal funding from the university. So we use ROR to identify the specific funder. And this is what you get out of box in DSpace, starting from version 8. Moreover, DSpace is also able to synchronize this information with ORCID. So if you are an ORCID member and you push this information to ORCID, what happens is that you can push also funding information from your repository to ORCID. And in this funding, again, the University of Basilicata is identified by the ROR ID. So let's go a bit deeper into technical implementation. As mentioned at the start, the implementation is available in DSpace 8 and also in DSpace-CRIS. For who is not aware of what DSpace-CRIS is, I invite you to look to some video on the For Science YouTube channel where you can find more information. But very briefly, DSpace-CRIS is an open source extension of DSpace. So it's had additional feature on top of what DSpace provide. We have seen that ROR in DSpace is integrated into submission process, and it's allowed to, it's possible to configure the metadata mapping. Amanda has how much information are available in a ROR record, and you can decide when you import this data in your DSpace, which metadata should be used to store this information. And we will see that in DSpace-CRIS, thanks to an additional feature of DSpace-CRIS, this integration make also more provide also more value. So during the submission, ROR is technically integrated in DSpace and in DSpace-CRIS as a live import data provider. This means that when you search for content that you want to import in DSpace, you can pick ROR and you can query the ROR registry and import data. Right now, the query is based on the ROR API version 1. So when you perform a query in DSpace, this is translated in a query to the ROR search API using the version 1. To deal with integration with ROR in DSpace, we have introduced a few additional metadata. We have introduced an organization identifier ROR to store the ROR ID. And we have introduced a parent organization, named organization.parent organization, where we can store eventually the reference from the child organization to the parent organization. Which metadata are used to store which piece of information from the ROR record is configurable in the ROR integration XML file. Which are the benefit of the ROR integration in DSpace in respect to the search, the faceting, to browse? So again, we expect that this integration will improve the quality of organization data. And this means that the organization name will be normalized and you will have less noise in your search facet and browse. Let's quickly explain which are the additional benefits that you can get from ROR with DSpace-CRIS. DSpace-CRIS allow to easily create entities, and in such case, organization unit, during submission of related content. So, for instance, you could submit a publication or a dataset and found a need in this publication or dataset to mention a specific organization. In DSpace-CRIS, you can enable a configuration that allow the submitter to directly import the missing record without relying on the administrator to make available in the repository all the organization, all the entities that need to be linked beforehand. One of the most interesting aspects in the DSpace-CRIS is the capability to deal with hierarchical metadata. In DSpace-CRIS, you can track information about affiliation, education, and qualification for your researcher. And all of these information are rely, of course, on accurate identification of the involved organization. And here is where ROR will help. The previous mentioned information are also relevant for ORCID, so you will see how this information can be synchronized with ORCID thanks to the availability of the ROR identifier. Last but not least, DSpace-CRIS also enhanced the metadata used to mine TOI with DataSite. This means that when the DSpace-CRIS repository assign a DOI, the metadata that are transmitted to DataSite include ROR ID for the affiliation and the publisher. So let's move to a live demonstration. This is the a test environment for DSpace-CRIS. And I'm currently logged in. So the first feature that I want to show you is the possibility to import content from ROR. What you are seeing is quite similar also in a plain DSpace. So let's say that we want to import an organization unit. We can search the SERPA database, or we can use the Research Organization Registry. So let's say that we want to search for Bicocca, that is another university in Milan. So this is the information that we have retrieved from the ROR API, and we can use this information to create a new record in the repository. And we will create this record into our unit collection. As you see, all the information are profiled. So we have the organization name, we have the acronym, we have the date of established, we have several identifiers, including the ROR ID, we have the website, the city, the country, and also really interesting, we have a type for this organization. And in this case, this is a university, so it's an education for the unit. Let's complete the deposit of this organization. So if I move to my researcher profile, a demo researcher profile on this instance, you see that among other data, there is a tab that allows us to see, for instance, the affiliation, the employment of this person. And what we can do is to, as we are the owner of this profile, we can go to edit to detail to add additional information. In this case, there is a difference between DSpace-CRIS and DSpace. The DSpace-CRIS edit is DSpace-CRIS provide a user-friendly edit screen that allow you also to manage hierarchical metadata. And this is the case for the affiliation, for instance, where we have, I'm affiliated with for Science, I'm the CTIO, Science 2016. I can also put some information about my education. So I have a postgraduate master from Bicocca. It was in 2005, 2006, and I can also add an additional graduation that is my master postgraduate master in mathematics, and this came from University of Rome, Sapienza. And in this case, you see that this institution is not yet in the repository, so the results are returned immediately from ROR. And this was in between 1998 and 2003. And I can do or add also the detail about my qualification. And for instance, I can say that I have a professional certification from Amazon as certified cloud production. And I can save this information. And here you will see all the data that has been entered. As you see, some of these organizations are highlighted and other no. The reason for that is that some of these organizations also have a local record, but Sapienza and Amazon doesn't have yet a local record. This depends on the specific configuration of this environment that requires the organization to be manually imported. But as anticipated in the slide, this can be also flagged in a way that import will happen automatically as soon as this organization is needed. Another nice feature is that if you mouse over the organization, you will see a short summary of the organization, including the ROR identifier. But of course, you can go to see the full record that contain all the information that we have imported from ROR. What I want to show you is the fact that this profile is linked to ORCID, and this is the ORCID profile for this researcher. Of course, we are using the sandbox environment of ORCID, so these are all fake data. In this profile, you see that there is already my employment, but there are no information about the qualification and education that we have just handed. So let's move back to DSpace and look to the ORCID setting page in DSpace. In the ORCID page of DSpace, we see that this information actually are not yet sent to ORCID and are sitting in the queue to be sent to ORCID. So I can just send this information to ORCID. And let's see how we can fix that. So let's see what happens when we import also the Sapienza record. So again, all the information from University of Sapienza, from the ROR registry has been retrieved from the API and will be imported in DSpace. And I'm also going to import information about Amazon. Also, in this case, the Amazon information, the ROR identifier, the city, the headquarters in Seattle is important. And please note that the type in this case is identified as a company instead than an education. If we go back to our research profile, one interesting thing that we can note now is that both Sapienza and Amazon has been linked automatically. And the reason for that is that also when the entity is not managed locally in DSpace-CRIS, when a relation is established using the ROR integration, DSpace-CRIS at least preserve the ROR identifier. So when we mention University La Sapienza di Roma for the first time, only the ROR ID was stored in the repository. But when a second time this organization has been imported, the ROR ID has been used to update the previous relation to establish a link with the local record. And you can also appreciate that looking to the edit screen, where now the University of Milano Bicocca and also University of Rome La Sapienza has been linked to the local database. And the same apply also for Amazon, that now is a local record. Okay, I want to try to synchronize again with ORCID, hoping that this time will work. But there is some connection failure with ORCID. Unfortunately, this is the nice thing of live demo. It will be related to the fact that we are using the sandbox environment, and maybe the data are not completely updated. But you can see there that employment was synchronized, and the ROR identifier play a crucial role in that, because it's the only way that a repository can send this kind of information to ORCID, because ORCID require organization to be identified by a persistent identifier, and the preference is for the ROR identifier. So moving back to our slides for some conclusion, I also like to present which is the plan for the next step. The idea for in the short term, what we want to do is to update the mapping to use the ROR API version 2. This will require just an update of the mapping. This because the implementation has been based on a configurable client where you can specify the endpoint of ROR. So you just need to update the endpoint to mention that you want to use version 2. And all the mapping is based on an external configuration file where you need to specify JSON path query. And as the structure of the JSON file of the JSON response from version 1 and version 2 is literally changed, all what you need to do is to update this mapping to reflect the new structure of the JSON file. But we will work on that, and this will be updated for DSpace 9 and for the coming version of DSpace-CRIS as well. We also want to improve the interoperability out of box. As mentioned before, the information the ROR identifier is exposed to OpenAIRE via YPMH for what mean in the case of funder. For DSpace-CRIS, we expose to DataSite, affiliation, and publisher. But we want to expose to DataSite also the funder using the ROR identifier. And to ORCID, in DSpace-CRIS, all the ROR identifier is used for both affiliation, education, qualification, and funders. Another thing that we want to do is to preserve the ROR ID when we import data, for instance, related to publication from external provider. Amanda has anticipated that many databases, such as OpenAlex, but also commercial like Web of Science, are starting to include the ROR identifier for the affiliation. Right now, when you import this data from this publication database, we only capture the affiliation name as a string, but we don't retain the ROR ID. So in the future, we want to be sure that when we import content from Web of Science or PubMed, we also retain the ROR ID to keep this information in the repository as well. And as anticipated at the start of my talk, we really think that the ROR integration is a foundation stone for interoperability. And as soon as you have better data about your organization in the repository, we can start to imagine additional features. We are exploring the possibility to make some integration with OpenAlex, for instance, and having ROR ID for your organization and for child organization like hospital and research center that your university hold could help to maximize such features so that we can search content in OpenAlex using ROR and just suggest to you relevant content for your organization. So we think that the ROR integration represents a step forward in the standardization of organizational metadata. As shown, as discussed, this enhances the data quality and the integrity of the content in your repository. Moreover, it will enhance the opportunity for interinstitutional collaboration. So the individual repository is just one of the data source into open science ecosystem. And if each of these data source can provide high quality data, other institutions could benefit of your data for their own purpose to reduce the input that your researcher have done in your repository to create a copy for research output that has been co-authored and to perform analysis about collaboration and to better understand on which other organization your institution collaborate. All what has been presented is towards an alignment with the open science principle. So we go further in support the fairness principle. So your content will be more findable, more accessible, more interoperable, as seen, and more usable by others due to the better quality of your data. I think that we have some time for questions.
Thank you so much, Andrea. That's fascinating and exciting. I think everything that you said about ROR improving fair metadata is very important. So yes, I'd like to open it up to questions. Those of you who've been watching in the chat may see that we did have a couple of questions about what's in scope for ROR, specifically overseas campuses of universities. I have to say, you would be surprised at how much expertise it takes to curate the ROR registry, and I am not a member of that team, but as best I can tell, I think usually overseas campuses of universities would get their own ROR ID, but I think it very much depends on the individual situation. If anyone has any other questions, please do feel free to post them in the chat or just unmute and ask them.
I can add one aspect in regard to that, Amanda, that is specific of this DSpace-CRIS. ROR usually don't track information about department or research unit at the university, because the idea is that the institution should be at most semi-independent from the other and should be the main focus for some research activity independently from the university. But at ORCID, when you send affiliation to ORCID, you can specify both a unit than an organization. And what DSpace-CRIS does is to allow you to track an affiliation to the department and to store locally the hierarchy, so that you know that the Department of Mathematics, Istituto Guido Castelnuovo, is the mathematics department of La Sapienza di Roma. And as the parent or unit as a ROR identifier, DSpace-CRIS will be able to synchronize the affiliation information with ORCID. So what will happen is that DSpace-CRIS will send to ORCID information that you are affiliated with the University of Rome La Sapienza, because this is the entity that have a ROR ID, and will specify just for ORCID that your unit is the Department of Mathematics.
Yes, that's very helpful. Cecilia asks, I'll say a little bit more about Cecilia's question, which is what triggers an organization to create children or related organizations. I'll just quickly mention that our ROR, I can state ROR policies for you, but I'll just paste this into the chat as well as reading it aloud. Parent-child relationships indicate a relationship where the parent exercises control over the child, or the child is a component of the parent entity, such as a research center within a university. If the organization is related, that denotes less defined connections, such as resource sharing or participation without direct control. I will just paste this into the chat. Those are ROR metadata policies. And again, every single request we evaluate based on these policies. We have a volunteer curatorial advisory board as well, where we refer difficult questions and update our policies as needed. But essentially, what we typically see is that for a university, you will have a research center being a child organization, and then very often something like a hospital being a related organization, because the hospital and the university function very, very separately, but still do have resource sharing kinds of relationships. I do see another question, which I'm very thrilled to answer, from Faith, asking, university organizations, child and related organizations can change in time. Does ROR support historical data of the same org? We do indeed. That's one of the main things that we implemented back in 2022. We have a status for organizations, which is not actually visible on the web form, because by default, all of the things that you find on the web are active organizations. But we have statuses for organizations such as active, inactive, predecessor, and successor. So for instance, organizations close all of the time. So if an organization is no longer in business, but it was used as an affiliation in public records, you want to have that record still remain around, but then we mark it inactive. Now, sometimes organizations merge. And so that's where you get predecessor and successor organizations. And again, all of this is quite delicate and expertly evaluated by our curators. But so when two organizations merge, they, one may merge into the other, and that becomes the successor, that becomes the predecessor. The other thing I'll mention about organization information changing is that if an organization just changes its name, which does often happen, but doesn't change anything else, we store that historical name in the aliases field. This is another name for this organization. And in fact, and then we just change the name, but it doesn't, trigger a new ROR record. One thing that we're thinking about doing, we've heard some requests for this, is that our aliases field, meaning just other names for this institution, doesn't specifically mark previous names as opposed to, say, just a nickname for the organization. So we are thinking about, in our next schema update, potentially marking this as a prior name for this organization. Does that answer your question, Kati?
Yes, very explained very well in detail. Thank you very much.
Sure, great. Jan asks in the, or Jan asks in the chat, would there be support in DSpace for adding ROR IDs to older records? I can say that, I'm trying to remember how, at ROR we have tools for doing this. Now, how that would be exactly incorporated with DSpace, I don't know. It would probably require sort of downloading your data and re-uploading it. One tool that I know many librarians really like is that we do have a ROR reconciler that works with OpenRefine. We have many tools that will help you match legacy data to ROR IDs. This is only one of them. I will also post our guide to doing that. Now, that would again probably require doing it outside of DSpace and then updating the data in DSpace, but we do have helper tools for people to do that at ROR. But Andrea, would you like to address that question about support for adding ROR IDs to older records?
Yeah, probably you don't have a lot of organization record in your DSpace because this has become possible just from version 7. Before you just have a simple item that usually describe publication. So if the question is how to add relation from this publication to organization, you can do that from the user interface because you can go to edit the publication and you can search for, you can search ORCID, you can search ROR for the organization that you want to put in connection, and you can import this data and establish the connection. If you already have some organization created that in your institution, maybe because you are a early user of DSpace 7 and you have created organization using Sherpa Romeo or other integration, this means that you can update this record using the bulk edit of DSpace. So you can export your data as a CSV, and you can use the add a column with the ROR ID in this CSV and import back in DSpace.
And I do see another question in the chat from Cecile asking, giving more details about the help ROR can provide to institutions who want to clean their affiliations. I did post a documentation link. I'll just, in the chat, I can maybe share my screen really quickly. We do have quite a lot of documentation at ROR. And really our, so at, you can get to this from our website, but this is our documentation site. We have one primary guide for cleaning up this old data. And there are just many methods for doing it. ROR does not actually, we don't do this as a service for organizations, but there are companies that will do this for you, various, if you're interested in doing that, or, if I were working in a university library, I would hire a student to do this. But essentially what we do is we have an endpoint on our API where that can help do this. We have a number of scripts essentially that we've made openly available. Here we've put those on GitHub, so there are several of these here. You can just simply sort of input a CSV and get back a list of ROR IDs. Now, these are never 100% accurate when you're doing this with automatic methods. There's always going to be some mistakes or things that it can't match. But it's, fast and easy. This Open Refine tool that I shared before, that's really for people who don't have too much data. And it's for people who want a very, very heavy level of control. They want to make sure they can get as close to 100% accurate as possible. And then there are lots and lots of third-party tools that people have built and open sourced to make that possible. So we don't provide it as a service, but we provide lots of tools that hopefully would help you correct all that legacy data. All right, we're a little bit over time. Thank you all very much for joining us. As I say, we'll send out the slides and recording just later this afternoon. Thank you so much for attending.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.